I were doing the class over again, I would not show the video on the shrub. I would just take a Sunday and talk about it. Come on in. I would just take a Sunday and talk about it. And I think we spent too much time on that. And then, of course, I got COVID, and I did not plan how things were happening, but next Sunday is Palm Sunday, and the Sunday after that is Easter. And can you think of better Sundays in which to discuss eternal life in the New Testament? So I'm going to be talking about eternal life in the New Testament next week, and we'll be going, and then after that I'm going for 1 week, and then we'll go on to Christian mysticism, and you'll see how it all connects, I hope. But one of the things that I taught this class, I don't know how many times in different churches. One of the things that always happens when you teach a class like this is people begin coming forward and telling you about having had experiences very like the one you're describing. And as you know, I'll talk about this a lot as we go forward. Carl Rahner, who's one of my favorite theologians, said the Christian of the future will be a mystic. Either she will have experienced God or she'll be nothing. And so I really think part of what we're seeing historically is a moment in time when people are looking to experience God. Now, as I'm going to pass it to Charlie, you all know Charlie. He's a member of the vestry, was very involved in building this building. I never can keep all various adjectives in your professional title straight. He's an ontological dermatologist, or something like that.
Skin cancer surgeon.
He's a skin cancer surgeon. But he's had an experience, you got a mic, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. He's had an experience, I just want him to share it, and if there's time after he's done sharing, you've asked all the questions, if you want to talk some more, we can until 9:30. So, next Sunday and Easter Sunday, we're meeting. Charlie?
That's right. Thank you. Well, it's interesting Father Doug did that because I'm going to start out my discussion about COVID because it will have a direct bearing on the rest of the story. The beginning of the story is in June of 2020, so we are just experiencing COVID here in Hood County, and I was one of the earlier cases of COVID, and I was very sick. I probably should have gone to the hospital, but I didn't. Had some complications. Anyway, the point of this is that I started having symptoms of what would become long COVID, and that also has bearing on the story, so that's the background. So here I am in this story about 7 months later. I'm at a retreat for mental health and physical health, and I start having some strange symptoms. I really can't explain what it is, but something's going on in my head. I basically call out. I head to a couple of doctors, and one of them says, I don't like the way this sounds. I'm sending you off for an MRI of your head. And the worst thing that you can imagine did happen. His staff says, the doctor would like to speak to you. This is not good. You know that it's not going to be good. When your doctor says, talk to me directly about the MRI in your head, I go, oh boy. So then he says, well, the neuroradiologist, the doctor who does the x-rays of your head, your brain, says, well, you either just had a stroke or you have a cancer that's probably going to cause your death within about 3 to 6 months. What a combination of possibilities. So I went then for a period of about 2 to 3 weeks where, like a lot of people, I went to every doctor imaginable. And basically what they were looking at was evidence that I had had something that sent a clot to my brain, which is the most common source of a stroke. And this also bears on the story, stick with me. Or I had a cancer, which had started somewhere else. So I went to the oncologist and I went to the cardiologist. After doing 1,000 tests, the oncologist says, no, you do not have a cancer that we can find, so it's very unlikely that you have a cancer that went to your brain. Now, that does not eliminate the possibility that I had a cancer that started in my brain. Cardiologist is on 1,000 tests also, no. Radiologist says, well, guess what? We're repeating the test. Now it turns out you really had a stroke. Why would this, relatively young guy, extremely healthy, no smoking, this, that, and the other, Why would I get a stroke? He says, you know, this is what we're seeing in people who have had COVID. There's a problem with the blood vessels. Now, this all bears again on what's going to happen. Well, I'm literally about to finish up with a cardiologist, and I have the event which I'm going to describe to you. And I tell the cardiologist about the event, which I'm going to describe, and he says, oh, we can't let that go. And on goes another workup, which I will describe. So here we are. Now we're finally to the point where I'm going to tell you an experience which is not unique, but is beyond our everyday experience of reality, okay? And I didn't ask for it. I didn't pray for it. I didn't hope for it. I'd heard about it, but I certainly hadn't studied it. So here's what happened. It's about April. It's in the spring. And I am sitting in my garden at home, and I'm just kind of relaxing. I've had a crappy last few months that I just described to you, and I'm just kind of relaxing. And then this is what happens. Everything loses its being. I'm not aware of anything. It's like somebody turned the amplifier down. I can't hear anything. I don't see anything, and it's not really that it's black. It's just that everything has gone away. There's nothing to see. And I said in my mind, I think I am dying. I had this thought. And the next thing that happened, I said, well, kind of like, wow, what's going to happen next? If I really am dying, what's going to happen next? Is really kind of like, well, I don't know. And then I had this thought. I said, what's going to happen to my kids, my daughters, adult daughters, I have two, and what's going to happen with my wife? This is my wife, Susie, at the time. And just at that time, these incredibly brilliant, it's like nothing I've ever experienced, these incredibly brilliant, sort of like cameos. I could see both of my daughters. They didn't say anything, but they were there against this, like I say, this background. It's not black, it's just like there's nothing there. And here they are, and there's Susie. I often get teary when I tell a story, so I apologize. So there's Susie, and I think, oh, I'm so sad. What's going to happen? And even before I could finish that thought, what's going to happen to them? In the old sense of this word, I apprehended. I didn't exactly hear anybody. I didn't think about it. There wasn't a voice, but I came to apprehend this message. And the message was, don't worry. They're going to be okay. And then they disappeared. At that point, my consciousness left my body, and it ended up about here. It's behind me and about this high. And I don't really have a body, but my consciousness is right here, and I'm looking down at my physical body. I don't recognize it as a living part of me, but there's like this form that I know is my body. And my body is sitting on this chair that I'm outside. Now, has anybody seen the movie Contact? Okay, it's really a pretty amazing movie. And for those of you who haven't, it's about a society that contacts us, gives us the chance to travel essentially to our Creator, is what it comes out to be, through a science that we don't understand. We're given the scientific method to do it. And there's this part when the scientist, Jodie Foster plays the female scientist, is in this pod that's going to travel to wherever it is she's headed, and the floor disappears, all right? And you go like, what the heck is happening? This doesn't fit our view of the world, physics and all that. And that's what it was like. So I'm looking down, and there's my body, and it kind of just sort of dissolves. And I actually tried to get John, asked him to do something we couldn't technically get to happen, but there was this incredibly brilliant white. It was sort of like fluffy, like, here's what it looked like. It looked like the thunderstorm clouds, cumulonimbus, I think they're called, where the cloud is so high that the top of it is receiving the direct sunlight, and it turns this brilliant, incredible white, right? I'm sure you've all seen it. It's like, and that's what it looked like. So I'm looking down, and basically everything disappears, and here's this billowy white, all right? And at that point, and I always get teary at this point, at that point, I start lifting up. This is what it is, going to my right. And again, I don't really have a body. It's just this consciousness. And I start lifting up, and then I start accelerating towards my right and higher. There's nothing there that I'm aware of. And now there's really a voice. It's not this apprehension. It's not my imagination. There's a voice. Now, I can't tell. Is it a man? Is it a woman? Probably not young, but I don't know how old. And the voice says, don't worry. You're never going to have to work. You're never going to have to feel like there's something to do. And that's when I felt the peace like I've never felt in my life. Never experienced this. There's no anxiety. There's no worry about what's going to happen. There's no deadline to do. There's nothing to think about. I guess I'd say there's no future, and there's also no past. And like I say, the voice says, don't worry, you'll never have to work again. And now I'm accelerating that way. And then it turns dark, and then I'm back in my body. So later that afternoon, I get the same feeling like it's going to happen again. It only lasts for a second or two. I don't really get into the sequence of things, but I recognize it. Well, about that time, we're going to go back to what I started out with. I go to the cardiologist, and the cardiologist says, oh, well, we can't let that go. I'm not going to discharge you. So we started out on another, let's evaluate this guy. And we did all kinds of things, and finally came to something which I already knew. I had a small, not a clot, I had a small blockage. I knew that for years. I had a small blockage. So to increase the profits of the clinic, they did a little stenting and angiography, but that was not the problem. So we go on, and he says, well, look, we never actually did that monitor. And a lot of people have heard of Holter monitors, the loop monitor, probably. Right? And what this is you're walking around, and this device is keeping track of what's going on with your heart in terms of the rhythm. I got with this brand new, hilarious, to me hilarious because the technology is just unbelievable. You glue it to your chest right here, and it not only senses and records your heart rhythm, but somehow, don't ask me, it connects with the internet, even no matter where you are. Don't ask me how it does it, but that's what it does. And if you've ever been in the cardiac care unit in the hospital, this is what they have for my recording. They've got a computer that's reading it, and if something goes haywire, the technician looks at it and decides whether it's real, and then they call the doctor if it needs to be. No kidding. It was 2.5 days after I put this thing on my chest. I'm just walking around. And I get back. I've probably been out 4 miles or something. I come back home. Here we go again with the garden. I'm sitting in the garden, the one in the front this time. And I get a call. And it's from the monitoring station. And they say, is this Kennard? Yeah. They say, what are you doing right now? Well, I'm looking at my garden. How do you feel? Oh, I feel fine. She says, we're going to talk to your cardiologist. We're going to get your cardiologist on the phone. So not too long, cardiologist calls me back. He says, well, we had a problem. He says, your heart slowed and then it stopped. That doesn't sound good. So the next day I'm at the cardiologist's office with Susie. And we're sitting there. He knows I'm a doctor, And he says, have you seen the rhythm strip, the EKG? Have you seen it from this event that you had the other day? And I said, no. He turns it around. Here's what it looked like. And you'll know. You don't have to be a medical doctor because you watch TV. Did it. Flatline. No electrical activity, right? This is the one where people dance around and they were in the hospital and they go, code blue. Well, anyways, this is what happened to me. This is actually what happened to me walking around. And here's a funny one. So my wife, she looks at the cardiologist and she says, well, what would have happened if it didn't start again? And the cardiologist goes like, He really did. That's what I said to her. Well, you'd be really glad that we kept those premium payments up on my life insurance. That's what would happen. So anyways, the next day I get the pacemaker, which I have, obviously. So it's pretty clear to me that this is all related, and talking to the doctors who were involved, it probably is. The COVID has caused in me something it does for a lot of people. It causes a damage to the small blood vessels that feed the tissues. It's what caused my stroke. It's probably what caused the failure of, we have our pacemaker. We all have a pacemaker that gives us the normal rhythm, and it probably got shut off by not enough blood supply. The point of this discussion is that we probably have a physical reason, we probably have a medical reason in my case, like a lot of cases, for an event that basically probably would have caused my death, but my heart happened to restart. It happened to, on its own, get going again. And according to my doctor, he says, well, that's usually what happens. But there was enough time probably where my heart stopped that I was started on this experience that we'll call a near-death experience. Most people, as I've read, who have had this, report a very similar situation, experience that goes through that sequence. A lot of people do exactly the same thing in terms of their thoughts. They say, I think I'm dying. They really do. They realize that this is probably what is going on. And then they go through a sequence that almost always is very similar to what happened with me. And I can talk, I'm going to answer your questions in just a moment. It changes the life of a lot of people in different ways. I'd say, I don't know what the fractions are, but some people, they say, I wish it didn't end with me going back to my earthly life. They saw them so beautiful, this peace that passes understanding. It's an amazing feeling. They don't want to give that up. It was so good. They don't want to go back to earth. That's probably a big part of folks. Then other folks, they say, this has changed my life. I want to go back. I realize that although heaven or whatever that is beautiful, I'm going to try and make my life on earth representative of that. And they say, I'm going to change my life. I'm going to bring the story to people, something like that. Now, for me, what basically happened was I realized how great, the promise was of that side of things. I didn't think it was my time. So I didn't regret it either way, but now I don't fear death at all. Not at all. And the fact is, in all different kinds of experiences, somebody gets hit by a car, they get hit by lightning, they're drowning. Everybody who lives tells the same experience. It's universal, cross-cultural. Something's going on there. I'm going to end there. Do you have any time left? We got some time. Father Doug anticipated that we would have questions. Maybe some of you have had this experience or know someone who has. A priest who was my priest in Fort Worth for years before I came here, he just happened to be at our house. I don't know, somehow it came up. And he's just nodding his head, and he goes, everybody's told me the same thing. Father Doug has an opinion about things. He told me that mystics apparently have an experience akin to this. Those people have been in the presence of God. They say the same thing. Okay, well, any questions? Anything you'd like to know about either my experience, reaction to it, anything like that? Uh-huh. How did it change my life?
I mean, do you still work, or did you say, you know what, enough of that?
You know, I'd say definitely I thought work doesn't matter, even though I did things helping people. I'd say that's it. And then the other thing I'd say is I tell people about it in the sense, my experience in the sense that everybody says the same thing, this peace. They don't have to worry about it. Death doesn't hurt. We have this great anxiety about it. But like I said, in a whole myriad of experiences, no matter what, people say the same thing. You know, their heart stopped one way or another, they lost blood, they couldn't breathe, they got stuck in a fire, whatever it is, they all felt the same thing. So I think that's it, you know, recognizing the limits of earthly work and toil, and also to carry the message that we don't have to fear death, at least not physically or what's going to happen to us.
So I know there's some studies of long COVID and people that had the type of damage, that's not the right
Yeah.
word, but the type of experience you had with COVID, and it was a monumental experience. So are you part of any of those studies? Because I know there's studies going on in Dallas and so on, or have they studied or using your case? Or?
I haven't heard specifically, you're talking about near-death experience along with long COVID. I haven't heard that, but one of the patterns of long COVID is what I had. Strokes, heart problems. I didn't get kidney problems. I had a little bit of kidney disturbance, but that has not turned into long damage. So I pretty much fit the pattern of long effects of COVID. It's basically what we call microvascular, what I was telling you about before. Interferes with blood supply to a whole bunch of organs. Yeah. What else? Anything else? Charlene?
Is having those symptoms what establishes the fact that you had long COVID? Or do they know that you're having unusual symptoms and that therefore you should watch out for it?
Yeah, so before even they were start using the term long COVID, I was experiencing that. Like I said, I was one of the first cases in this area, but in other areas where they'd had tremendous numbers, like New York City, they were starting to see it. But there was no question about it, even before it was written about, that every week I'd have a recurrence of the symptoms that I had in the acute illness. So they're still trying to figure it out. There's different theories. I think one of the major ones is this blood vessel thing. Yeah. So, like I said, strokes, heart problems, kidney problems, really any organ, but that's kind of what I had. And as to how many people end up with a near-death experience because of that, I haven't heard anything about that. Yeah. Oh yeah, they're scary.
When Doug first gave us that form, I cheated. I didn't read the books of the three people that wrote the books about it, but I went online and watched all of their YouTubes.
Oh yeah.
It's pretty interesting. And they too have, it's changed their life, and they too have even gone out and sought out other people.
Yeah.
So it's anecdotal stories.
Right.
But every one of them, except for one, said that the majority of the people not only see living relatives like you did, but they see past relatives who had died, and a lot of them saw their former pets.
No.
Did you see anybody from the past?
No, it was just the examples, you know. Like I say, and some people say they don't have to think about it. It's just like, there they are, you know. For me, it was the specific question in my brain, what's going to happen to my kids? What's going to happen to my wife? And then there was this answer. The answer was something, like I said, that I apprehended. It wasn't a voice. Like, don't worry, they'll be okay. So, I did.
So Charlie, do you wake up every morning thinking about this event? Does it stay with you?
I tell the story not infrequently to folks. And I don't think that I think about it too much. I can tell you that after it happened, there was this, there was one day when Susie and I were talking, I said, you know, I said almost, but I could have said more realistically, I basically died, you know. So I don't think it's that I consider it often, except when I'm telling the story. And this was one of the few times where I didn't break down and get teary, because I usually do. Pardon me. Because it was such a moving experience that I never had anything like it at all. And I think it's part of it. There's there's research on this, and it's very, very, very limited. Some doctors, some anesthesiologists, neuroscientists have tried to make observations or to prove these experiences have some basis in reality. And something I said the other day, I think it's not the right way to study it. How can you study using scientific methods something which appears to be beyond science, our way of testing things? How can we prove that it really happened? I don't know that you ever can. Another one that's fascinating is there's some evidence that there are parts of our brain that are extra active at the time of death or near death. And I had somebody, so maybe that's what's causing these experiences. So I had a nurse one time when I was relating this story, and she said, well, do you think that God had some design in our bodies? And I said, well, I think it's very possible. I think our God is a benefactor, is a Lord that cares about us. And okay, we were built in something that helps us make that transition. I think that's okay. I mean, we were created, right? So maybe God said, you know, these people that I've created, they're going to fear death. They're one of the few creatures that knows, not the only ones, but they're one of the few creatures that knows that death is not only guaranteed, but maybe it's imminent. And what are we going to do? What am I going to do? God says, what am I going to do to help these human beings that I've created make the transition from earthly life to what is beyond? So, yeah.
How would you describe your feelings as you look back on this event? I mean, you, I guess, talked about that, but are they feelings of excitement, of joy, of gratitude, of how would you put it?
Well, like I say, my reaction to it, you know, my taking away from it, this experience, it wasn't as profound as it is for some people. And that's just me. You know, I've got problems, and they fall into different ranges of things. I don't think it solved that. I think in me, what it did was allow me to carry that message. You know, so here I am, the messenger, which isn't too different from some other figures in the world of God, carrying a message from the experience they had. I don't know that I'm exactly equal to them, but I think it's the same thing. The same thing.
I am loath to do this. It's obvious we could continue the conversation with Charlie for a long time, but I got to tell you, there are two rules. I've mentored a lot of young clergy, and tell them there's basically three rules of managing a church effectively. One, never take the choir off. Two, never take the altar guild off. Three, if you take them off simultaneously, just leave.
I get it, Fred. I get it.
I want to thank you. Your presentation was incredibly coherent. It was really very impressive. I also think it's a And it opens us up to the reality that God's actually doing something. And I'm very grateful to you, Charlie. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next week we'll start singing what the New Testament says about eternal life.